Donald Trump just signed a peace deal with Iran. After a war that killed thousands of people, shook global energy markets, disrupted shipping through the Strait of Hormuz, and brought the Middle East closer to a regional catastrophe than at any point in decades, Washington and Tehran have suddenly agreed to stop fighting. But here is the shocking part. Iran appears to have emerged from the conflict with many of its core strategic assets intact. While the United States is now offering sanctions relief, unfrozen assets, and a path toward hundreds of billions of dollars in reconstruction funding. Even more surprising, Trump has abandoned one of his main war objectives. After previously promising to destroy Iran's ballistic missile program, he now says it would be unfair for Iran not to possess missiles if other countries have them. So, did America win this war? Did Iran survive it? Or is this agreement simply the first chapter of an even bigger geopolitical struggle? To answer that, we need to understand what was actually signed. The interim agreement extends an existing ceasefire for another 60 days, while negotiators attempt to reach a permanent settlement. The deal includes the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz, the lifting of U.S. sanctions, the unfreezing of Iranian assets, and the creation of a reconstruction mechanism worth up to $300 billion. Iran, in return, agrees not to pursue nuclear weapons and to allow international supervision of its enriched uranium stockpiles through the International Atomic Energy Agency. The timing matters. The war that began in February triggered one of the most dangerous periods in modern Middle Eastern history. More than 7,000 people reportedly died. Oil prices surged. Global shipping routes came under pressure. Governments around the world feared a prolonged regional conflict. Now, both sides claim victory. And that brings us to the first major revelation. The biggest winner may not be the United States. It may be Iran. Before the war, Washington demanded sweeping concessions. American officials repeatedly called for the destruction of Iran's nuclear infrastructure, the dismantling of its ballistic missile program, and an end to support for regional proxy groups. Yet the interim agreement delivers only part of that agenda. Iran agrees not to build nuclear weapons, but Tehran has made similar commitments before. Its enriched uranium stockpile remains inside the country. Its missile arsenal survives. Its government remains in power. And its regional network of allied groups remains largely untouched. Meanwhile, sanctions relief could unlock enormous economic benefits. Billions of dollars in frozen assets may become accessible again. Energy exports can resume. Foreign investment could eventually return. From Tehran's perspective, the agreement looks far closer to a recovery package than a surrender document. That explains why Iranian leaders are presenting the deal as proof that resistance worked. But if Iran appears to have protected many of its interests, what exactly did Washington gain? That leads us to the second revelation. Trump's real victory may be economic rather than military. The single most important clause in the agreement concerns the Strait of Hormuz. This narrow waterway handles a massive share of global oil and gas trade. During the conflict, disruptions in the strait sent shockwaves through energy markets and created fears of a global inflation surge. Every major economy felt the pressure. Europe worried about energy security. Asian importers feared supply shortages. Developing countries faced rising fuel and food costs. The agreement immediately changes that calculation. Hormuz reopens. Oil exports resume. Shipping traffic begins moving again. Energy markets gain confidence. In fact, oil prices started falling as traders anticipated a return to normal maritime traffic. For Trump, this matters politically. Lower energy prices mean lower inflation pressures. Lower inflation reduces economic risks. Stronger economic performance helps strengthen domestic political support. In other words, Trump may calculate that stabilizing global markets delivers more value than pursuing maximal military objectives. But that calculation carries its own risks, because critics argue that Iran learned an important lesson from this conflict. And that creates the third revelation. The war may have changed the balance of leverage in the Middle East. Traditionally, economic sanctions served as Washington's primary tool for pressuring Tehran. This agreement weakens that tool. Iran endured months of conflict, maintained key strategic capabilities, and ultimately secured negotiations that include sanctions relief and reconstruction funding. Many of America's critics now argue that Tehran demonstrated its ability to absorb military pressure while forcing the United States back to the negotiating table. Even some American conservatives have voiced concern. Their argument is simple. If Iran receives sanctions relief without surrendering its missile program or fully eliminating its nuclear capabilities, then future adversaries may draw their own conclusions about how much pressure the United States is willing to sustain before negotiating. At the same time, Iran's leaders are openly emphasizing what they call a diplomacy of strength. That phrase matters. It signals that Tehran wants regional rivals and domestic audiences to believe that military resilience produced diplomatic gains. Whether that perception is accurate matters less than the fact that millions of people across the region may now believe it, and perceptions often shape geopolitics as much as reality. So what does all of this mean for the Middle East? First, the immediate risk of a major regional war has decreased. The reopening of Hormuz removes one of the most dangerous pressure points in the global economy. Second, energy markets gain breathing room. Countries that depend on imported oil, including many European and Asian economies, will welcome any reduction in volatility. Third, the next 60 days could prove more important than the war itself. The interim agreement postpones the hardest questions rather than fully resolving them. Negotiators still must determine the future of Iran's nuclear program. They still must address verification mechanisms. And they still must build enough trust to transform a ceasefire into a lasting settlement. That will not be easy. The United States and Iran have spent decades viewing each other as adversaries. One agreement cannot erase that history overnight, but it can create an opportunity. And right now, that opportunity may be the most valuable outcome either side achieved. Because after months of war, threats, sanctions, and escalation, the most important battlefield is no longer military. It is diplomatic. And the future of the Middle East may depend on whether these two rivals can keep talking longer than they spent fighting.